A human didn't just save her life, he taught her to feel again. Jace Everett had long ago stopped counting days. On a planet scorched by twin suns, time melted like everything else. The ancient palace, half buried in crimson sand, half forgotten by civilization, had become his sanctuary, his penance, his purpose. He spotted her from the east tower, a splash of violet against the endless red dunes. Through his binoculars, he could see the trail of blood behind her, dark against the sand. She staggered 3 more steps before collapsing. By the time he reached her, the smaller sun was setting. Up close, her alien beauty was striking. Violet skin dusted with fine sand, iridescent green hair matted with blood. A deep gash ran from her shoulder across her back, crusted with desert grit. She wore little more than battle-worn garments that resembled a red top and bottom, remnants of what must have been ceremonial armor. "You're safe now," Jace whispered, though she couldn't hear him. Gathering her in his arms, he was surprised by her weight, dense muscle on a frame not much smaller than his own. Her skin felt surprisingly cool despite the heat. The journey back to the palace was arduous. Twice she stirred, eyes flickering open to reveal irises of deep amber flecked with gold, before unconsciousness claimed her again. By nightfall, he had her settled in the coolest chamber, the wound cleaned and dressed. For 3 days she burned with fever. Jace used his limited medical supplies and knowledge gleaned from years as a combat medic. He bathed her forehead with cool water from the palace's ancient cistern, changed her dressings, and spoke softly to her in her delirium. "You're a fighter," he told her on the second night, watching her struggle against unseen enemies in her dreams. "But you don't have to fight alone anymore." On the 4th morning, Jace entered the chamber with fresh water to find her standing, a makeshift weapon fashioned from a broken piece of furniture clutched in her hand. Her amber eyes blazed, with fear disguised as fury. "Stay back," she hissed, her voice hoarse but melodic, with an accent that made the common language sound like poetry. Jace set down the water basin and raised his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. You've been injured." "Where am I? Who are you?" She backed against the wall, wincing as her movement pulled at her healing wound. "My name is Jace Everett. This place is called Saratha Palace, or was centuries ago. Now it's just a refuge. I found you in the desert, half dead." Her eyes narrowed. "Why save me?" The question startled him. "Why wouldn't I?" Something flickered across her face. Confusion, perhaps. She lowered her makeshift weapon slightly. "My name is Senna Vaxari, last warrior of the Crimson Veil." Pride tinged her voice, but underneath lay something broken. "You're safe here, Senna. There's water, food, and no one will find you." Jace gestured to her bandaged side. "Your wound was deep. You should rest." She glanced at the clean bandages, then back to him with suspicion. "You treated me. I was a healer in another life." Senna studied him with those piercing amber eyes. Jace realized she was assessing him as a potential threat, noting his height, build, the old scars on his arms, the way he carried himself. "Why are you alone in this place?" she finally asked. "The same reason anyone ends up here." "I was running from something." He offered a small smile. "The desert collects the broken and the lost." Her posture remained rigid, but she lowered her weapon fully. "I'm not broken," she stated firmly. "No," Jace agreed softly. "Just wounded." "There's a difference." For a moment, something vulnerable crossed her face before the warrior mask slipped back into place. She swayed slightly, still weak from blood loss and fever. "You should sit," Jace suggested, not moving toward her. "I've made food. Simple, but it will help you regain your strength." Senna hesitated, then slowly lowered herself to the edge of the bed. "I won't stay long. Once I can travel—" "There's no hurry," Jace replied. "The desert isn't going anywhere." Outside, the twin suns blazed across an unforgiving sky. Inside the ancient stone walls, 2 strangers, each carrying their own scars, began the delicate dance of learning to trust again. The palace kitchen was cool, carved deep into stone that held ancient memories. Jace worked silently, preparing a simple stew from desert plants and preserved goods. He felt Senna's presence before he heard her. A shift in the air, a warrior's silent approach. "Your wound is healing well," he observed without turning, "but you shouldn't be walking so much yet." Senna leaned against the doorframe, her violet skin luminous in the dim light. "On my world, we don't rest until the battle is won." "And what battle are you fighting now?" Jace asked, finally turning to face her. She didn't answer, but her amber eyes followed his movements with careful precision. 3 days had passed since she'd first awakened. She'd spent them prowling the palace like a caged predator, speaking little, watching much. "You never asked why I was in the desert," she said abruptly. Jace shrugged. "Everyone here has secrets. The palace doesn't demand explanations, but you want to know." It wasn't a question, only what you want to share. He ladled stew into 2 bowls, the scent of herbs rising with the steam. Senna approached cautiously, accepting the offered bowl. Their fingers brushed, her skin cool against his warmth. She flinched almost imperceptibly at the contact. "I was a general," she said suddenly, staring into her bowl. "Commander of the 3rd Division of the Vaxari elite. We were sent to negotiate with the Terran colonies on the Outer Rim." Jace's hands stilled. "I was stationed on the Outer Rim 3 years ago." Their eyes met across the table, recognition flickering between them. The Treaty of the 7 Systems. Humans and Vaxari, centuries of mistrust culminating in fragile peace. "You were there," she whispered. "Medical Corps," he confirmed. "I treated casualties from both sides." Something dark crossed her face. "Then you saw what they did to the defectors." The memory surfaced. Violet-skinned bodies, ceremonially scarred, left in the killing fields as warnings. "Traitors to the Vaxari cause." "You're back," he said quietly. "That's not a battle wound." Senna's grip tightened on her bowl. "The Vaxari value genetic perfection. I carry a mutation, a defect in my cellular regeneration. It was discovered during her routine examination after the treaty." Her voice hardened. "I was to be retired quietly. I chose exile instead. They hunted you." "They still hunt me," she corrected. "A defective general knows too many secrets." Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the ancient stones. Fine red sand began filtering through cracks in the windows, the beginning of a storm. "Sandstorm's coming," Jace noted, rising to secure the shutters. "We'll be locked in for at least a day." Senna followed him through the corridors, watching as he methodically sealed the palace against the approaching tempest. The wind's howl grew to a scream. "Why did you leave the Medical Corps?" she asked as they worked together, her movements still stiff from her healing wound. Jace was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I couldn't save enough of them," he finally said. "After the peace, there was an outbreak in the refugee camps. Something engineered, targeted Vaxari. Physiology." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You think it was human-made?" "I know it was. I found evidence, reported it up the chain." His jaw tightened. 3 days later, my unit was attacked. I was the only survivor." "You ran." "I chose to live," he corrected, echoing her earlier words. "To find proof." The final shutter secured, they stood in the dimly lit corridor as the storm raged outside. The palace groaned around them, ancient stones withstanding yet another assault. "So," Senna said quietly, "we're both traitors to our own kind." Jace met her gaze. "Or loyal to something larger." The storm intensified, sand hissing against stone like countless tiny claws. In the great hall, they built a small fire, its light dancing across carved walls where forgotten civilizations told their stories. "Will your wound scar?" Jace asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Senna's hand moved unconsciously to her back. "Yes, my defect ensures it." "Among humans, scars are stories," Jace said. "Proof of survival. Among Vaxari, they are shame, imperfection." Her voice was bitter. "Evidence of failure." Jace studied her face in the firelight, the proud angle of her jaw, the fierce intelligence in her eyes. "I don't see failure when I look at you." Something vulnerable flickered across her features before she masked it. "What do you see?" "Someone who chose her own path," he said simply. "That takes courage." Senna looked away, but not before Jace caught the slight softening around her eyes. Outside, the storm howled its fury, but within the ancient walls something fragile was taking root. Trust, growing like a desert flower between stones. 15 days after Senna's arrival, the warning system Jace had installed throughout the palace perimeter began to wail. The sound cut through their breakfast, a piercing reminder that the outside world still existed. Someone's crossed the outer. Markers, Jace explained, already moving toward the eastern tower. Senna followed, her warrior instincts instantly alert. From the tower's observation point, they saw the approaching threat, a sleek military craft bearing Vaxari insignia, hovering above the desert floor, leaving no tracks. "Hunter squad," Senna whispered, her body tensing. "Elite trackers, they found me." Jace studied the craft through his binoculars. 4 heat signatures, heavily armed. "I have to leave," Senna said, already calculating escape routes. "If they find you harboring me—" "This palace has hidden people for centuries," Jace interrupted. "We have options." Their eyes met, a silent battle of wills. Senna saw determination in his gaze, not fear. "Why risk yourself for me?" she asked. Jace's answer was simple. "Because you matter." 3 words. They shouldn't have hit her with such force, shouldn't have made her heart clench in her chest. She had commanded thousands, been decorated with the highest honors of her people, yet no one had ever simply told her she mattered. Not as a warrior or general, as herself. "There's a network of tunnels beneath the palace," Jace continued, breaking the moment. "Ancient escape routes, but we need to move quickly." They hurried through the palace, gathering essential supplies. In her chamber, Senna hesitated before retrieving the weapon she'd fashioned during her first days, a blade made from scavenged metal, balanced perfectly for her hand. When they reached the library, Jace pushed aside a massive bookshelf, revealing a narrow passage. "This leads to the catacombs. From there, the explosion rocked the eastern wing, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. They're not here to capture," Senna realized. "They're here to eliminate." Jace's expression hardened. "The garden," he said. "My research—" "We have to go now," Senna insisted. But she saw the anguish in his eyes. Years of work, of hope for reconciliation between their peoples. Another explosion. Closer. Decision made. "We split up," Senna said, her voice shifting to the command tone that had once directed armies. "I'll draw them away from the East Wing. You secure the research. Meet at the western tunnel entrance in 20 minutes. "Senna, trust me," she said, meeting his gaze. "I was a general for a reason." Before he could argue, she was moving, her body remembering its purpose. Through the corridors she ran, deliberately making noise, leading the hunters away from the garden, away from Jace. She encountered the first tracker in the Grand Hall, a tall Vaxari male in stealth armor. His eyes widened in recognition. "Traitor," he hissed. Senna didn't waste breath responding. She moved like water, her makeshift blade dancing. The tracker was good, but she had been the best. When he fell, she didn't look back. The second and third hunters. She led in a chase through the palace's western wing, using her knowledge of the layout to separate them. One by one she neutralized them, not killing but disabling. These were her people, following orders as she once had. The commander she found in the courtyard, methodically placing explosives along the foundation. "General Vaxari," he said, turning to face her. "The council sentenced you to excision from memory. You should not exist." "Yet here I stand," Senna replied, circling him warily. "Consorting with humans," he spat, "living in filth and imperfection." "I found truth," she countered, "and freedom." They clashed in the ancient courtyard, 2 elite warriors of a dying tradition. Senna fought with everything she had, not just for her survival now, but for Jace, for the garden, for the possibility of something she'd never dared hope for. The E4. Commander's blade sliced her arm, drawing violet blood. Senna didn't flinch. She pressed forward, her movements fluid and precise. When the opening came, she took it, a decisive strike that sent the commander crumpling to the stone floor. Breathing hard, she secured his weapons and ran toward the western tunnel entrance. The palace shuddered around her. Some of the explosives had detonated. Time was running out. She found Jace waiting, a pack of specimens and data drives slung over his shoulder. Relief washed over his face when he saw her. "You're hurt," he said, reaching for her bleeding arm. "Later," she replied. "We need to move." They descended into the tunnels as the palace trembled above them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the small light Jace carried. They moved swiftly through the ancient passages, the sounds of destruction fading behind them. Hours later, they emerged into the open desert, kilometers from the palace. In the distance, smoke rose from the eastern wing, but the main structure still stood. "It survived," Jace said quietly, "as it always has." Senna looked at him, this human who had saved her life, who had shown her gardens could grow in deserts, who had seen value in her imperfection. "What now?" she asked. Jace took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Now we rebuild." In that moment, with twin suns setting behind them and danger temporarily at bay, Senna realized she was no longer running from something. She was running toward something. Toward him. The abandoned outpost sat at the edge of the Crimson Wastes, a forgotten way station on a trade route long since dried up. Jace had known of its existence, one of many potential refugees mapped during his years in the desert. For 3 weeks, they made it their temporary home, healing wounds both physical and deeper. Senna established security perimeters. Jace salvaged what he could of his garden research. Together they created something unexpected: domesticity. On the 23rd night, Senna found Jace on the outpost's roof, charting stars. The larger moon hung low, casting long shadows across the desert floor. "The council will send others," she said, settling beside him. Jace nodded. "I know. And the disease you were researching, it needs to be neutralized before it can be weaponized." "I know that too." Senna studied his profile, memorizing the details, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his hair curled slightly at his neck, the steadiness of his hands. When had this happened? When had he become so essential to her? "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about what comes next." Jace set aside his charts, giving her his full attention. "And? There are resistance factions among my people, others who question the Council's genetic purism. With the evidence you've gathered about the bioweapon plus my testimony," she paused, "we could force change from within." "That would mean going back," Jace said, his voice carefully neutral, "to your homeworld." "Yes." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Going back meant leaving him. "It's the logical strategy," she continued, falling back on military terminology when emotions became too complex. "Strike at the source rather than fighting symptoms." "Logical," Jace agreed, but something in his tone made her look sharply at him. His eyes held an emotion she hadn't seen before. Resignation, perhaps, or loss. "You could come with me," she said suddenly, the words surprising her as much as him, "to a planet that considers humans barely above vermin." Jace raised an eyebrow. "I wouldn't get past the outer atmosphere. As my protected associate. Under ancient laws of obligation, I could claim you as a possession," he finished with a sad smile. "Is that what you want me to be?" "No," Senna admitted. "No, that's not what I want." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "What do you want, Senna?" Jace finally asked, turning to face her fully. The question stripped her bare. In all her years as a warrior, as a general, no one had asked what she wanted. There had only been duty, honor, service to the collective. "I don't know," she whispered, the admission feeling like surrender. "I've never been allowed to want." Jace's hand found hers in the darkness. "Then perhaps that's where you begin. Not with what is logical or strategic, with what you want." His touch sent warmth spreading through her, the same warmth she'd felt in the garden, but stronger now. Undeniable. "When I was marked defective," she said slowly, "they said my mutation made me unstable, unpredictable, that I would make decisions based on emotion rather than logic." She looked down at their joined hands. Perhaps they were right. "And perhaps emotion isn't the weakness they taught you it was," Jace countered gently. Senna lifted her gaze to his. In that moment, something shifted, the final wall crumbling. "I want this," she said, her voice barely audible. "You, us. I want to see what we could become." Jace's smile was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her time to retreat if she needed, he leaned forward. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity. Senna had never been kissed. Physical affection was considered inefficient among her people, but her body knew how to respond, melting against him, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, his neck, his hair. When they broke apart, both. Breathing hard, Senna felt altered on a molecular level. Something fundamental had changed. "There are other ways to fight the Council," Jace said, his forehead resting against hers. "Other paths to change." "Show me," she whispered. Days later, they stood at a crossroads in the desert. To the east lay the spaceport, ships that could take them to the resistance groups operating in the outer systems. To the west, the mountains. Held secret communities, humans and aliens living together despite ancient hatreds. "Either way will be dangerous," Jace said, squinting against the glare of twin suns. "Either way we face it together," Senna replied. She had shed her warrior's garments, wearing now a practical outfit adapted for desert travel. The ceremonial red pieces of her past were packed away, not forgotten, but no longer defining her. The scar across her back was healing, no longer a mark of shame but a testament to survival, to choice, to transformation. "Ready?" Jace asked, offering his hand. Senna took it, her violet fingers intertwining with his tan ones. In her other hand, she carried seeds from his garden, resilient life that could bloom in the harshest environments. "Ready," she confirmed. As they walked into the desert toward an uncertain future, Senna realized she had found something she never knew she was missing. Not just love, though that burned bright between them. Something more fundamental. Belonging. Home, not in a place but in a person. Above them, twin suns blazed across an endless sky. Before them stretched a path they would forge together, and within her, where there had once been only discipline and duty, something new had taken root. As impossible and beautiful as a garden growing in the desert. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them within the palace's labyrinthine corridors. By the time the winds subsided and the twin suns reappeared, something had shifted between them. Conversations came easier. Silences felt comfortable rather, then tense. On the 7th night of her stay, Senna couldn't sleep. Her wound had healed enough that pain no longer kept her awake. Instead, it was the strange sense of safety that unsettled her. She had grown too accustomed to danger, to running. Moonlight filtered through the high windows as she wandered the empty halls. The smaller moon cast blue-silver light across ancient mosaics, illuminating stories of forgotten gods and lost civilizations. Her bare feet made no sound on the cool stone floors. A scent caught her attention, something green and living, out of place in this desert sanctuary. Following it, she discovered a narrow staircase she hadn't noticed before, winding upward. At its top, a simple wooden door stood slightly ajar, releasing the tantalizing fragrance. Pushing it open, Senna froze in astonishment. Before her stretched an impossible garden, a circular space open to the night sky, filled with plants of every description. Some she recognized from distant worlds, others were completely foreign. Artificial lights mimicked different suns, and a complex irrigation system kept everything lush and vibrant. "Couldn't sleep." Jace's voice came from the shadows. He sat on a stone bench beside a small pond, fingers trailing in the water. "This is impossible," Senna murmured, stepping into the garden. "How does this exist here?" "The palace was built over an ancient aquifer," Jace explained. "The original architects created this space as a sanctuary. I restored it." Senna moved between the plants, touching leaves and petals with gentle fingers. "These are from at least 12 different systems." 13, Jace corrected with a small smile. "I've been collecting for years." She approached a plant with familiar violet-blue flowers. "Nyxanthia," she whispered, "from the Vax-Ari homeworld." "It was the hardest to cultivate," Jace admitted. "Temperamental. Doesn't like to grow away from home." Senna touched the delicate petals. Yet you made it bloom, with patience and understanding what it needs. His eyes met hers across the garden. Sometimes what seems impossible just requires the right conditions. Senna sat beside him on the bench, their shoulders almost touching. Above them, stars punctured the night sky like distant promises. "Why plants?" she asked. Jace was quiet for a moment. "After seeing so much death, I needed to create life." He gestured around them. "Each of these has medicinal properties. I've been documenting them, hoping someday the knowledge might help both our peoples." Understanding dawned. "The outbreak in the camps, you're looking for a cure," he nodded. "The disease is dormant now, but not gone. If tensions rise again between humans and Vaxari, it could be weaponized," she finished. "This garden is my resistance," he said simply. Senna studied his profile in the moonlight, the quiet determination in his eyes, the gentle hands that had healed her, now tending to fragile lives from across the galaxy. "After I was marked as defective," she said softly, "I wondered if perhaps my people were right, if imperfection was a kind of poison that should be purged." Jace turned to her, his expression intense. "Look around you, Senna. Nothing here is perfect. That flower has asymmetrical petals. That tree grows at an odd angle. This entire garden shouldn't exist in a desert palace." His hand moved cautiously to cover hers. "Imperfection is just another word for uniqueness." His touch was warm, solid. Senna didn't pull away. "I was a warrior for so long," she whispered. "I don't know how to be anything else." "You don't have to be anything else," Jace replied. "Just yourself." "And who is that?" she asked, the question hanging between them like a fragile thread. "I'm still learning," Jace said, smiling slightly. "But I'd like to know her better." Something warm unfurled in Senna's chest, unfamiliar, frightening in its intensity. She had commanded armies, faced death countless times, but this vulnerability terrified her more than any battle. "It's late," she said abruptly, standing. "I should rest." If Jace was disappointed by her retreat, he didn't show it. "The garden is always open to you," he said simply. At the doorway, Senna paused, looking back at him, surrounded by his impossible creation. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me this." "Thank you for seeing it," he replied. Later, in her room, Senna pressed her face into her pillow, inhaling deeply. For the first time in years, she dreamed not of battle or pursuit, but of gardens growing in impossible places, and hands strong enough to heal what was broken.